Today, it's my pleasure to introduce to you all Professor Choi. He is an applied theorist that specializes in marketing with friction. His research delves into various forms of friction, such as search, information, and financial friction. Professor Sanderson couldn't join us today as he had a hip injury. Um, but anyways, if you have any questions, please ask in the chat first. Nevertheless, please join me in welcoming Professor Choi on his talk about consumer search and price competition.
Thank you very much for the introduction. So let me share my screen now. So from my perspective, feel free to interrupt or raise question anytime, but I understand there's a system here, so I don't mind being interrupted in my talk. So again, thank you very much for having me here. I'm very happy to talk about my research. So I'm told that I'm supposed to give some background information about myself before the actual talk, so let me try to do it. So I grew up in Hong Kong. I basically studied there until my college. So I finished my college in Hong Kong. I studied computer engineering, and I also worked there for a couple of years as a computer programmer. So my background is pretty much engineering. Yeah, so after I start working, so I enjoy the programming job. At some point, one of the manager talked to me and suggest me to learn some economics because that will really help me to understand how the business work. So at that point, he's still making the suggestion from the perspective of the company. He thinks if I know the technical skill of computer engineering and some economics, I'll be more useful for the firm. That was the situation. And then I actually followed his advice. So I came to the United States for graduate degrees in economics. So in the beginning, it was just a master degree. So it's 1.5-year master degree. Didn't think about going further than that. But once I start to learn about economics, I thought it's really interesting. And seems like the job prospect is also good. That's why I pursued the PhD degree in economics as well, and then worked as a faculty member since like 10 years ago. So that's my background. We can talk about it if you're interested, because I understand a lot of you are at some point going to make your career choice or college admission decision. So I also told to explain a little bit why I picked economics as a career. So again, I make a transition from computer engineering into economics. So my background is such that I basically enjoy computer programming. I also like mathematics. During college, I also minored in philosophy, so I kind of enjoy these things. When I had my graduate degree or master degree in economics, I realized all these things you can find in economics. So there's some level so it's mathematical, especially at the graduate level. It involves some level of philosophy, because in economics, a lot of time you have to think about what the government wants or what the government should do. So naturally, it involves some philosophy, and you think about what is right and wrong for the society. You also have to think about individuals' decision to understand how people make decisions. That's also related. And finally, nowadays, computer programming is crucial to studying economics. So naturally, you will be doing a lot of these things if you study economics. So I thought, oh, wow, all these elements that I like, I can find here in one subject. So I find it really interesting. So I would like to do it. I also think the subject is just by itself useful to make many useful insight for policy. And that jobs available, so that's important too. So I pick economics because of all these reasons. There are jobs available and it's interesting.
Okay, cool. Those are definitely really valid reasons. So that's cool.
Yeah. Yep. So that's about myself. Well, next is also about myself, but that's the next thing is about my research area. So as mentioned in the introduction, I studied market with friction. In particular, I use a lot of search theory. So search theory is a subject to study how individuals search and collect information in order to resolve some decision problems. So you can find this decision. So in our daily life, there are big and small decisions we have to make. Usually the bigger decision, we spend a lot more time collecting information and think about it. Here are some examples. So the example that we see a lot is consumer search in a daily basis. We have to think about things that we want to buy. So for example, we might do web search on Amazon multiple times a day. That's quite common. That might not be the most important decision in your life, but it happens at a very high frequency, that kind of decision. And then there's some bigger decision for you guys. Sometimes about college admission, you have to pick the school to go to if you're going to college, and also the subject as well. So these are big decisions in your life. You probably will spend a good amount of time just to think through which subject interests you most, whether job prospect is good, and then which location to go to study certain degree. So that's another example where it's a decision that you want to spend a lot of time and energy to collect information, to think through it. And then later on, after you graduate, probably the next big thing is job search. You look for a job that will help you to build a career or get you to do things that you want to do. Job search is important. It's one of the most important decisions for many people because it affects your life indirectly. So people spend a lot of time and energy to do it. And then there's also some other decision you think may be less related to the market, but actually you can also use the through the lens of search theory to think about it. For example, marriage decision. Of course, there's some non-economic aspect to it, but there's also you can also use search theory to think about the opportunity that you can meet your right partner, the time that you take to meet the person, and then once you meet the person, whether the other person want to explore more with you as well. So all these things, at the end of the day, search theory can help you to think about that as well. And then later on in your life cycle, a lot of time you might enter in the stage you want to build a family, look for a house. So housing search is also an example where you can use search theory because house is similar to consumer search, but this is much bigger in terms of this value. So people take a lot of time to look for the right house. So search theory are also used to study those decisions. So I'm going to tell you a little bit more about search theory through an example. But the background is such that at the end of the day, you will see how search theory will help us to understand market outcomes. In the example, each individual are going to search optimally before they settle down on one alternative or another. And then the market outcome is going to be determined by the interaction of all these individuals. So each person is doing the optimal thing for themselves, and then the optimal decision put them together will help to shape the market. Will also help us to understand certain phenomena that we observe in the market as well. So today, I'm going to show you an example about in the goods market. Okay, something a standard example in consumer search. If there's any question, feel free to ask. So I'm going to show you an example about this household product. So a bottle of ketchup. So I'm sure a lot of you have consumed this product before. So if you try to purchase this product, of course, you can just go to grocery store and buy directly. It's not so expensive, so it doesn't really matter what price you pay. But if you really look into the market, think about the prices of this particular product, you will find out that the price is not unique. That means different stores are selling this product at different price. Not surprising to some degree. Here in this histogram, we are showing the frequency at which you can find these prices. So this program shows that the highest price, so think of these prices as prices that you can observe in grocery stores. So think of these as different prices in different grocery stores. The highest price in the figure is $3. The lowest price that's offered is 50 cents. And then on average, so the middle of the distribution is approximately 1.75, so $1.75. So, so this is the distribution of prices you can think of it as the price in the neighborhood. So if you don't particularly search hard, you just randomly enter one store, on average, the price that you face is $1.75. It's like the average of this distribution. If you search really hard, then you can get to the lowest price store. If you exhaust all the store, you can find the price with a good deal, so 50 cents. If you are really unlucky and you only sample one store, you might be paying $3. So it depends on your luck. So naturally, there is a search problem here because for the same product, there's price dispersion in the economy. Depending on the value of your time, you might want to spend more time in searching, but if your time is really expensive, maybe you just enter the first store, buy the ketchup, and then leave. So it really depends on how sensitive you are to prices and the value of your time. So let's try to just formalize this story just a little bit, not much. So just write down the consumer's decision in words. So if you randomly pick a store to trade with in this story, the average price is 1.75. Suppose with 30 minutes of effort, you can locate the lowest price store. So with 30 minutes, maybe you search on your phone, or maybe you actually visit all these stores in the next few blocks. You find out the lowest price store and you find the price of 50 cents. Now, what is the return to spending the 30 minutes of time to search? It's going to be the time difference, the difference of the prices. So on average, the difference is 1.75. So that's the price you pay if you don't search, minus 50 cents. That's the price that you pay if you search. So the difference is the gain that you have by searching. And then you might not buy one bottle of ketchup. Over time, you might buy, today you might only need one bottle, but over time, next week, 2 weeks later, so on and so forth, you might need multiple bottles. So times the quantity that you're buying. So the product of this number is the return of spending the 30 minutes to look for that bottle, to look for the lowest price. Now, from the consumer's perspective, we are going to think about the value of your time. If you are really busy, you have a lot of important things to do, you will think, okay, I have no time for this decision. I'm okay with paying a higher price. So in that case, your time value is higher than R in this equation, capital R. And then you say, okay, I will not search. But if you're not that busy, you have nothing super important to do in the meantime, then maybe you want to search because your time is not so expensive. So at the end, you will see some consumers, they will search, some are not. And also this translates into some consumers, you will think they are more price sensitive and some are less price sensitive. So that this decision is going to affect firms' pricing decision. So firms have to think about what is the number of consumers who are price sensitive, what's the fraction that are not price sensitive. And that fraction of price sensitive and non-sensitive consumer is the result of this consumer search decision. So each person make their own decision, put this decision together, it will determine the demand of a product or how price sensitive the market is to prices. And then firm understand it and will use this piece of information when they decide their prices. Okay, so far so good. Okay, so that's the consumer side. The next thing we'll turn to the firm side and then the story will end there. So now we want to think about what's the firm's perspective in terms of choosing their own price. In particular, we will come back to the picture and ask the question, why would some firms pose a higher price and some firms pose a lower price? What is driving the decision? So to answer that question, of course, to some extent, the firms or the grocery store, they're not identical. They're at different location, or they might have different costs of providing ketchup. To some extent, you will think it's natural that they don't pose the same price, of course, because they're different sellers. But in data, even if we are focusing on the grocery store at very similar location, providing very similar service to the consumer, you still see price dispersion. So nearby store of same quality of service, you see they post different prices as well. So then the question from from economics point of view is to ask, why are they doing it? Why? So because this is the result of the optimal pricing. So we ask, why are they choosing different prices? So let's try to think about this question. If it's not because the firms are different, why would the firm post different prices? The explanation that we have in economics turns out the difference is not on the firm side, but rather on the consumer side. The consumers different, as we just discussed, is that some consumers, they are willing to spend their time on searching, and they are informed about the prices in the market. So now I'm going to call this, just for the sake of presentation, I'm going to call this local consumer. They're familiar with the local market, they understand prices. And then there's some uninformed consumers, they don't search, their time is too expensive. So they're going to just shop randomly. They go into the first store, see the bottle of ketchup and buy immediately. So I'm going to call these tourist consumers. They're like tourists. They don't know which store is selling things at the lowest price. Now, once you understand there are two groups of consumers, firms are going to do pricing in cater to each group of consumer. And that's why this price dispersion. So the story or the explanation is that some sellers or some grocery store at the end are going to post a low price to attract the local consumers, the locals, because these locals, they understand the market, they understand prices. If you post a low enough price, you will attract these people to come to your shop and buy. So by posting low price per bottle of ketchup, you get a lower profit margin, but you make it up by the volume. You sell a large quantity of the ketchup. And then some other seller, they will use the opposite strategy, which also makes sense. They will cater the service to the tourist consumers. So they will post a high price. They understand that high price will not get any local consumer to come. But if some tourist consumer, they randomly bump into the shop, they will just buy immediately and they're willing to pay a high price. So these high price sellers, they sell a low volume of goods, but they make it up by the markup. Every unit that they sell, they have a high profit margin because the price is much higher than the cost of providing it. In economics, we like to use the word in equilibrium. Basically mean that at the end, when everyone are optimizing, choosing the optimal strategy, we call that outcome the equilibrium outcome. So here in equilibrium, the sellers, they're indifferent. So they're going to earn the same profit no matter which pricing strategy that they use. They can focus on the locals or they can focus on the tourists. At the end, one strategy get you higher volume, lower markup. The other strategy give you higher volume, lower markup. And at the end, they are about the same in terms of generating profit for the firm. So, and that story basically explains why similar firms, they are willing to post different prices because their price are catered to different group of consumers. So just to summarize the story I show you, I can show you this picture. So there's some local shops and there's some tourist shops. These shops, they're in similar locations and they have similar service quality. So the difference is not in the shop itself. But these shops, they're posting different prices. The tourist shops post high price, local shop post low prices. The reason is because they understand the consumer have different price sensitivity. The local consumer are very sensitive to prices. The tourist consumers are insensitive to prices. So at the end, the local shop will post low price and will attract all local consumer to go. So high volume of trade. The tourists in this story, they're going to shop randomly. So sometimes depends on the luck. They might enter a local shop. And if they're unlucky, they might enter a tourist shop. So the arrow can go anywhere. It's just random for the tourists. And then if they're unlucky, they enter the tourist shop and then they post a high price. Bad for them, but good for the tourist shop. So at the end of this story, the prediction of economics is such that There will be some low price shop. They will trade with high volume, and then there will be some tourist shop. They post high prices and they will trade with low volume, and then both shop will coexist because at the end their profit are kind of the same, but using different strategies. This is one explanation that economics provide us to justify why, or to explain why we are seeing price dispersion as shown in this picture. So this example is about ketchup, but it's actually much more general than just ketchup. If you look at all kinds of items, you can see price dispersion. Similar stores actually provide very different prices to the consumer. And one major explanation of this is to use search theory to explain it through the lens of consumer searching, but they're using different strategy to search, and firms take this into account. At the end, firms post different prices. So feel free to ask questions if there's anything. So that's the example I would like to show you to give you a feeling of what search theory is about. So we are using these kind of stories or this kind of example to think about market. At the end, we see different market phenomena, sometimes are puzzling. For example, prices here, why there's dispersion? If you take an introductory economics class, usually price is determined by the demand curve and supply curve. The intersection of them is the price. So usually that story will tell you there's a single price in the market, but that's not the case in data. So we are curious why that's the case, and search theory tells us the answer. Okay, so I will skip this because I already explained. Okay, I got a question. How do you conduct research for this stuff? For example, bio and chem research is done in lab. Excellent question. Okay, I'm going to explain it right now. In the next 2 slides, okay, I'm going to try to answer this question. Okay, give me 1 slide. I'll get to that. So before I turn to the methodology, I'm going to talk a little bit more about the research that I do. So I use search theory to study pricing. A good chunk of my research is actually about pricing on the internet. So not just, I also study pricing in the brick and mortar stores, but also online market. So how does the internet make the problem different? How does it compare to the physical store that we do? So the difference is when you shop online, a lot of search is guided by search engine. So it's not like you randomly search for things. Usually there's some software or some website that help you to search. Google, Bing, Expedia, these are all examples of search engine help you to organize the internet and sort the products in certain order. Consumer use this search engine to look for low prices and then also good quality of products. So not just search for the lowest price, like the last example, but also product quality or product that match your taste. Now, just a quick overview, how does the internet change price competition among sellers compared to physical stores? So the first thing is nowadays it's easier to meet seller if you shop things online because it's so easy to find an online store. Just matter of clicks, you go to Amazon, you go to any website, e-commerce website that you trade with, very easy. If you have to go to the local Best Buy, you have to actually drive there, at least take you 20 minutes or so. But if you go to bestbuy.com, much easier to do that way. So you, with the same amount of time, now you get to meet a lot more sellers. So because of it, it should increase price competition among sellers because now consumer can find out the prices much easier than before. So that's one impact of the internet, but also it has something less obvious or more subtle. It turns out the fact that the internet is providing us so much information about the product can actually lead to less price competition among the sellers. That might be somewhat surprising, and the reason is the following. If you go to a grocery store to buy, let's say, detergent, like for washing dishes, you go there, there's an entire aisle that's selling these items. You go there, look at the detergent. They, at least to me, they all look the same. Okay, they have different color, but to me, they're just detergent. I might look a little bit at the label, look at whether it's organic or not organic, but I won't look too hard. I'm not going to look into every chemical ingredient of these detergents. So most of the time, what I do, just look at the brief labels. Okay, if today I want an organic version of it, go for it, and then just buy the cheapest one. So I use the price to guide my decision at the end in a grocery store. Now, if I do the same shopping, let's say on Amazon, where I'm doing internet shopping, it's actually much easier for me to look up the chemical ingredient. I just search on my keyboard. I just look up the word of a particular chemical ingredient. I immediately can see which detergent will have certain ingredient or not. The search engine really make it easy for me to explore the product ingredient. So it's much easier. If I shop online, I can look into the composition of these detergents. And then now, because it's so easy to look into this information, suddenly I care more about these ingredients. And then I care less about the price, because at the end, I care about both. Previously, in a physical store, it's hard to look into product quality or product information. So I have to rely on the price to guide my decision. Now it's easier to look into product quality, so I rely more on it and I rely less on the price. The sellers of the detergent understand that. So they understand the consumer actually less price sensitive because of this reason, because there are many other product attributes that can affect purchase decision. Price is now just one of them. It's not the only thing anymore. And because consumers are now less price sensitive, you can actually reduce the amount of price competition among sellers, because now lowering or hiring the price doesn't really affect consumers' purchase decision anymore. So that might be a somewhat more subtle and more surprising conclusion about the internet, but by providing more information about the product, you can also reduce competition as well. So that's some insight that we learned. Now, how do we study this kind? What are the methodology that we use to study this question? Usually, we don't do experiment. Like, so the question I ask is, in chemistry or biology, we just do things in the lab. You do experiments. So in economics, we don't do experiments. So some people do it, but it's not easy. We don't all have our own business. I cannot just change the price in a grocery store to do experiments. So we don't do it. We use real-world data. Okay. So we basically, if I want to study grocery store pricing, I just collect a lot of prices from grocery store and look into their transaction volume, etc., and then use the real-world data to study the pricing decision of the firms. For example, another example is the recent project that I'm doing. We will try to study how advertising affect people's consumption decision or purchase decision, and also the information collection decision. So our plan, so this is a kind of a new project. We're still doing a lot of things about it. We're going to collect 3 types of data. We're going to collect individual level web browsing data. So we're going to collect data about the web search history. Basically, we're going to collect the entire history of web browsing. So we're going to collect data about which website, which URL people visit. I mean, this is not spyware, right? The person whose data is being collected knows what's going on and agree to do so. So they're willing to share data. So everything's transparent. We're going to collect this data to collect how people browse the internet. This is going to tell us what kind of information people are collecting before they make a purchase. This data is going to also tell us the transaction that people make online. So we're going to see what product they buy online and what prices they're going to pay for it. But turns out it's not enough that you only see the price that consumer pay for. You also need to look at the product that are not being purchased. We need to understand the set of products that the consumer consider, and not just the final product that's being purchased. So we're going to collect product prices as well, regardless of whether there's sales or not. We need to look at the entire set of products in the market that are available to consumer. So we'll collect this information as well. And then we'll also collect advertising expenses by firm, because nowadays advertising is very targeted. So if the firm want to spend money to advertise the consumer, they can tell Google or tell Bing or tell Instagram, etc. They can put advertisement very targeted to a particular group of consumer. I can put advertisement only target people of certain age group or certain social background, things like that. So we're going to collect information about firms' advertising expenses for each social group. And we are going to use this data to look at how the expense on advertising will change people's behavior of collecting information and also change their purchase decision as well. So how do we study it? We're going to collect the data, look at it to get some feeling of how the data set look like, and then look at the correlation between expenses and consumption behavior. After that, usually the next stage is to write down an economic model. An economic model is a mathematical model that basically tells the same story that I told earlier to you about the bottle of ketchup. So in the ketchup story, there are prices, consumers search optimally, and then firm use different pricing strategies. The entire story, you can write it down with equations and math. So that's what we mean by mathematical model. So once we get the data, we'll write down a mathematical model to describe people's behavior. At the end, we will use the data to quantify the model to figure out the parameter value in the model. And then using the quantified model, we're going to make prediction about if firms change their behavior, how does it going to affect the market, change the demand of the consumers. So for economists, our lab, we don't have a lab like biologists or chemists. Our lab is the mathematical model. So we get data, use data to inform us how the mathematical model should look like. And then we do various kind of experiment in the mathematical model to ask questions regarding what happens if government increase taxes or change policy. How does it affect the economy? So we do all these experiments with the mathematical model. And at the end, we give policy recommendation to different people, usually to the policymakers or to the firms, and then they can implement and test whether the suggestions that we make are actually consistent with the outcome that they observe. So that's how we conduct research. So I think that was an excellent question. We don't have a lab for economists. We use mathematical model as our lab. So that's the end of my presentation. Just one last word. I think this is actually a very exciting time to study economics, even more exciting than when I was a student, because there's so many advances in technology, in computers, in data mining skills, etc. All these new tools make economics an even more exciting thing to study. You can talk about a lot more than before. And job prospect is good. So if you have an econ degree, typically finding job is not such a big problem. Econ major typically find jobs pretty easily because there's a demand for people who understand economics and have good data skill. So that's valuable skills. Also, again, I say it's interesting to study economics at these days because thanks to the advancement in technology, there are a lot more data than before. Nowadays, there are many new and interesting data sets. For example, the data I just mentioned about observing every individual's URL, the website that they visit, these kind of things don't exist 20 years ago. But now you can do these things. You can observe a lot more. Of course, you need consensus from people, but some people are willing to share their data and you can study these things. So this is exciting time for that reason. And also a lot of advances in the skill to analyze or study data. So all these advances in machine learning, big data techniques, and the recent advances in AI really make programming much easier and studying data much easier than before. For these reasons, I think econ major is still a great choice. And if you're interested, definitely consider very seriously. So yeah, that's the end of my presentation. I'm happy to discuss.
Cool. Yeah. Thank you so much, Professor Choi, for sharing all of that with us. And yeah, I think that some of us in here are definitely either going to be econ majors or are considering majoring in economics. So that was really helpful.
Great choice. Yes.
Yeah. And I actually have like a question. What are some of the industries where like the tourist type of like shops are more prevalent?
Pardon me, can you say the last part again?
What are some different industries where like the tourist type of shop is more prevalent?
Oh, okay. So it would, according to the theory, that will be when, or according to the story, your question will be equivalent to saying in what product you see more price dispersion.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because price dispersion is driven by the existence of these tourist shops. They pose high prices. So typically in things that you spend less effort to search. So let's see, what are the products that you see more price dispersion? Let's see. So out of my head, I forget. I might get this one wrong. I need to look up the data. So on top of my head, I think it usually corresponds to things that the price is less observable. If the price of the product are very observable, typically it will put more discipline on price competition, and firms will not try to use the strategy we just described. Because if it's very easy to look up prices online, then you will just go to the lowest shop before you buy. So prices that are less observable. So if you are thinking about buying, let's say, a new car, these prices are pretty observable. You can go online, look up the dealership, you can get information from them. And these are expensive products. So people don't tend to not do research. A lot of people would like to do research. So you expect that fewer tourist shops for these expensive products. But then for lower price product, actually like ketchup, you expect more price dispersion because you expect people don't spend so much effort in searching for these things. Throughout your lifetime, maybe you will buy many bottles of ketchup, but most of us may be sometimes too lazy to find out which shop selling ketchup at the lowest price. So you actually expect grocery store use that for the advantage. They are going to charge high price. So I think actually grocery store, like the example we just saw, these are the things that you expect more price dispersion compared to the large ticket item that are expensive, where people spend a lot of effort to search.
I see. Okay, that's good to know. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, it depends on the market structure. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Does anyone else have any questions? You guys can ask now. I feel like now is probably the best opportunity to do so because we have a smaller today.
So there was one hand earlier, but it's gone. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, okay. There's a question. Okay. It's from Andrew.
How do unexpected things like pandemic, etc., affect companies that use higher prices? Do they just switch to low price? How do they know to switch back to higher price? Okay. How do unexpected things like pandemic? So that's a great question. I mean, right now we still so the pandemic is kind of recent. Right now we still try to understand what happened during the pandemic. But in the data that I just received recently, we look at how people's web search behavior, how many websites they look at, what kind of website they look at. we see a substantial increase in web search activity during the pandemic. People browse website a lot more than before, which makes sense because we're stuck at home. So of course we browse internet more. So one would think actually because of it, people spend more time searching online because they have the time. This is precisely the example where your time becomes less expensive because you have nothing else to do. You cannot go out and play. So the options are fewer. So your time is less expensive because of that reason, and you spend more effort to search. So one thing I believe is true is the pandemic make us more price sensitive and we search harder for lower prices. So that definitely put discipline on what the firm are doing in terms of pricing. Now, how do firms actually do pricing in real world is actually a very complicated question. So you bring up the travel industry. So if you look into airline tickets or hotel rooms, these kind of things that are related to travel, you look into data, there's a lot of fluctuation in their prices. So for hotel room, for example, even if the same person use your computer to look up hotel room prices, you find different prices if you search at different point of time. And the same thing across individual as well. Different people search for hotel prices, even look for the same hotel, you might get different prices. So hotel prices, there are lots of, there are two reasons why the prices keep changing. One is the firms are actually doing a lot of experiments. They want to experiment with the consumers. This is so-called A/B test in the industry. They do a lot of experiment. They try to increase the price a little bit, sometimes decrease the price a little bit to understand the demand curve of the products. So they do a lot of experiment to understand whether increasing price or lower price will increase or decrease demand. So they do a lot of these things. And on top of it, they also do a lot of price discrimination. So that explains why different people, when they look up the same product, they might get different prices because the firms, especially in the travel industry, they understand people of different background have different willingness to pay. If you are richer, maybe you don't mind paying a higher price for the hotel room. If you have more time or budget, your budget is more tight, then you are more sensitive. So ideally, the sellers or the firms would like to offer the price just enough to make you to buy, but still charges the highest possible price for each individual. So that's the example of price discrimination. So in the hotel industry, if you go to online website, there are lots of price variation. And a lot of it is because of the experiments, and some of it is because of price discrimination. And this part basically partially explains your question, how the firm learn about consumers' demand. They do a lot of experiment to figure out the demand curve. And then if they find out the pandemic make people more price sensitive, they will lower prices.
Okay, cool. Thank you for answering that question. Yeah. Okay. Cool. I see Andrew's comment also. Okay. So I think that should cover everything for today. Yeah. If anyone has any questions, I think Professor Choi would be okay with you guys emailing him. Is this
Yes.
okay? Yeah.
Feel free to email me if you have questions about economics in general, or if you have to make a college choice decision. I think that's the relevant search decision for you guys. So feel free to reach out. I will tell you what I know about these things.
Yeah, I'm sure that would be very insightful. Okay. Well, I think that's it for today then. Again, Professor Choi, thank you so much for coming to join us and like sharing all this about like search theory and stuff. I definitely learned a lot of new things today, so I do appreciate.
Excellent. Thank you very much. I enjoyed talking to you guys.
Okay, cool. Well, thank you guys for coming then. And then this will be recorded if you guys ever want to go back and check this out again. So yeah, we'll be sending out the recording link.
Can you send the link to me as well?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. So that's it then. And then if you guys want to stay behind to chat, feel free, but this will be the end of our event. Okay, cool.
Bye.
Thank you, Professor Choi. Okay.
Thank you.